folks, I wanted to give you an update on that Lee Francis situation in North Carolina, where a 25-year-old black teacher has been suspended for 10 days and is not being allowed to return to the classroom. Here's an update on the story, and I'll make my commentary at the end.
Lee Francis, of course, a teacher in North Carolina who was suspended for trying to teach the First Amendment in his classroom. 2 students walked out. They were ticked off, upset that he actually stepped on a flag to illustrate exactly what that meant. Well, yesterday, the Cumberland County School Board met with him, a long hearing various witnesses, and Lee is back with us to give us the results of that. Lee, so first of all, glad to have you back on the show. How long did this take?
We begun the hearing at 9 o'clock and we ended around 5:30.
Okay, 8 hours?
Yes.
Okay, so how many people testified in this hearing?
13.
13 people. Who were the folks who testified?
The superintendent, the director of the warehouse, the associate superintendent for human resources, a couple of my colleagues, the student in question, myself, and a former county commissioner as well.
Any student testify on your behalf?
No.
Well, they wouldn't allow that? So they only heard from the student who objected?
That's correct.
Okay. So were all the school board members present?
No, 2 were missing. Out of the 9 people, 7 were present, and the vote was actually taken via racial lines.
Okay, well, so what ended up happening?
The vote upheld the superintendent's recommendation to suspend me for 10 days without pay.
So you're suspended for 10 days without pay. Was any decision made as whether or not you're going to return to the classroom?
The superintendent made it clear to me that he had no intention of putting me back into the classroom.
So the school board's decision was only as to whether or not you be suspended or fired? So what was their decision?
That I will be suspended without pay. They don't control whether or not I go back into the classroom.
Now the superintendent made it clear, what, yesterday? He's not putting you back in the classroom?
He's made it clear for the last several weeks that he has no intention of putting me back into the classroom.
So you're suspended for 10 days, no pay. So you, effective immediately?
Yes.
So 10 days is up, what, December?
It'll be December 11th, approximately.
And then what happens?
And then I go back to the warehouse.
Okay, but so he's back to the warehouse
for the remainder of the year. The interesting thing is there was a teacher at Pine Forest High School in the same county under the same superintendent. The superintendent gave this woman 5 days for using a racial slur against the black student and put her back into the classroom.
A white teacher?
That's correct.
What, use the N-word?
She used HN, which is house N-word.
So she called a black student a house nigger?
That's correct.
And she got suspended for 5 days?
And returned back to the classroom.
And she's back in the classroom?
That's correct.
But you were teaching about the First Amendment and stepped on the flag to illustrate it, and you got suspended, shipped to a warehouse, moving pallets, now suspended for 10 days and can't go back to the classroom.
And according to the county, my act was more egregious than the teacher in Pine Forest.
Okay, what I'm trying to also understand when we talk about this is, so you said it was along racial lines. So how many school board members voted to suspend you?
5. The 5 white members of the board voted with the superintendent. The 2 black members of the board voted with me.
And who were the 2 board members?
The 2 that were present were Carrie Sutton and board member Miss Judy Musgraves.
So who was it there?
James McLaughlin and Lisa Chisholm.
And both of them African American?
That's correct.
Where were they?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
They literally skipped a school board meeting?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm trying to understand. This has gotten lots of attention, and they just were not there.
They were not there.
All right. We don't call them to figure out where they were. I'm just trying to understand where they were. So superintendent, so what's next for you?
I serve my time, go back to the warehouse. I'm heartbroken. I mean, I want to go back to a classroom. The ACLU has not returned our calls. Those folks that were excited about us in the beginning have disappeared. They've left me out to dry.
You've also started a GoFundMe page,
Yes.
and what's that information?
That information is available on my Twitter page, and I'll post that for people to see. Essentially, just we don't make a lot as teachers anyway, so to take 10 days is essentially about $1,400 worth of pay.
So you're trying to through GoFundMe raise about how much you trying to raise?
About $1,400.
$1,400. That way, so you don't have any loss of income as a result of the suspension.
That's correct.
Well, man, first of all, we appreciate it. What we'll do is we'll also put the information out on our social media platforms as well of the GoFundMe account, and certainly we'll talk to you in 10 days to see what happens next and what's the opportunity. So when will the superintendent even tell you whether he's going to revoke your teaching privileges?
We asked him. We have not had any response. After that meeting yesterday,
So he has you in total limbo.
I am in complete limbo.
All right, then. Lee Francis, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
All right, this is wrong on so many levels, okay? First of all, this man is a teacher. For them to pull him out of a classroom, okay, and place him in a warehouse performing manual labor when his contract called for him to teach, to me, that's a cause for action. Now, I'm wondering where all of the people who initially rallied to this man's cause were yesterday. I really want to know, and Roland made mention of it, that he's going to contact the two board members who were black. Where were they? And this particular hearing has received attention for at least the past month. So I don't want to hear that something came up that was more pressing. They should have made other arrangements because they needed to be here. Now, for those of you who say that race is not a factor in damn near anything and everything where there are white people and black people involved, this particular case refutes anything that you want to say. Now, number one, if the two black members had shown up, it appears that the vote would have been 5-4. And as Mr. Francis said, the vote apparently would have been taken on racial lines. 5 white people voting against him, 4 black people voting for him. And again, I am totally disappointed in the fact that 2 black members didn't show up to this particular hearing, and I am making possibly a false assumption that they would have voted with this man. We're always hearing about equal treatment of all people. Can somebody please tell me how this man who stepped on a flag that pissed off 2 white kids. Now, there was no physical damage done to, to the kids, no emotional damage, let me say, as far as I'm concerned. Now, that may or may not be true. The 2 kids who objected may have been so traumatized by the stepping on of a flag that they will be walking around for the foreseeable future with the shakes because of this act. But the act itself was protected under the First Amendment. Now, Mr. Francis was not making a political argument. He was teaching a lesson on the First Amendment. Okay? That's what he was doing. But for him to have received a 10-day suspension and not to have been placed back in the classroom is a travesty, where you have a white teacher who calls a black kid a house nigger, only given a 5-day suspension and placed back into the classroom. Well, what about that black kid who now has to see that same white teacher every day teaching this class who called him a house nigger? How egregious is that? You cannot, in my opinion, equate the two. So when we talk about black people getting stiffer sentences for the same crime, in my opinion, though this was not a crime, this man received a much harsher sentence for a much less egregious crime, if you want to call it a crime, and I don't. Now, you got this superintendent whose history was that he came out of San Diego, California. Yeah, I know, progressive San Diego, but everything in California is not progressive. And this superintendent, who was fired from his job in San Diego, definitely wasn't, because he went from San Diego to Florida. He was fired in Florida from a superintendent type job. It took him 3 years to land this particular job in North Carolina. If this superintendent was all that and a bag of chips, he wouldn't have been fired from his 2 previous positions. This superintendent, in my opinion, is laying all over this man for, let us say, reasons that have nothing to do with the fact that he was teaching a lesson on the First Amendment. I think, in my opinion, that there is a bias here. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure of it. I'm disappointed also in the ACLU, because they normally will jump in here with both feet, and they initially had indicated that they would, and now they've disappeared. I also want to know why there weren't any students that supported his actions allowed to testify, apparently. That was a question that Roland asked, but he really, I guess, ran past that particular question to get into another subject. But no, this is absolutely wrong, and this gentleman probably can't afford it. Obviously he can't, because $1,400 that he's trying to raise on his GoFundMe page tells me that he doesn't have a lot of money. But he needs to get a lawyer and to basically sue the school board. He needs to sue that superintendent and be able to move away from that particular school to a different school, different school board, if possible, even a different state. But because the superintendent can yank his license, he's screwed for at least the next 2 years. Now, he can go to a charter school and teach, and that would be my suggestion, at this point. But for the balance of the school year, he's stuck in a warehouse doing manual labor. And you wonder why black people feel like they're getting the short end of the stick, especially on things as, in my opinion, trivial as this. If the superintendent was that ticked off, a simple apology should have sufficed here. But as usual, they want, 8 pints of blood for even the most minuscule of transgressions. And again, I don't believe what this teacher did was a transgression.